Hey there, it's Coach C. It's Christine Nielsen with Contrast Consulting, and thank you for joining the Coach C podcast today. We have an incredible and special guest. I would call a personal friend, but someone who I met at a speaking engagement for a TEDx talk we did in Brampton, and instant connection. We both have very similar perspectives on consulting clients, on coaching clients, and how we work together, which is quite amazing. So I really want to welcome you today. Thank you so much. Welcome, Sunil Godse.
Welcome.
I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'm very conscious of that. And Sunil is the CEO of Intuitionology, and he is going to tell you a lot about what is Intuitionology. And during this particular time of reinvention is how we're framing it. You know, everybody is currently either in quarantine or working on emergency services and very concerned. So you're seeing heightened levels of people in heightened levels of concern, anxiety, stress, as well as other people looking to, what do we do and how do we do it? So people want to be in action. How can they find semblances of control, or what do they have mastery over? So I call this particular time really a time for reinvention. And so Sunil is joining us today, and he's going to talk with us a lot about, number one, how intuition plays into this particular period of reset and what people are dealing with. So again, thank you so much for joining us, Sunil, and just maybe tell us a little bit more about why Intuitionology. How did that start? What is that?
Yeah, so Intuitionology really came about as a result of my earlier project in finding out why people fail. And it was really fascinating because I built a career on those people going through hurdles or potentially failing. And then I get the nod and they pay for my services to avoid that. So it was really fascinating. And when I looked at the research, everybody's writing about success. Everybody's in the research, in newspapers and all that, but nobody really talks about failure. So it was really interesting for me to say, okay, but failure is the root of success. Like, you have to learn the lessons from those hurdles or failures, or you just won't be successful. And so it was really important for me to do that. I wrote my first book, Fail Fast, Succeed Faster, and started speaking on stages across.
Fail fast, succeed
faster.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and it was 300 people, people like Jim Treliving, Bruce Croxon, big, small, all different backgrounds, all different industries. Why did they fail? What were the hurdles? And the one question I kept getting when I started speaking on stages across the world about this book was, what was the one thing that people did that got them to fail? So my immediate reaction is, well, there's 75 stories in there. There's a reason why I interviewed over 300 is because there's not one thing. And I kept getting this thing again and again. So let's go back to the podcast reviews. I'm telling myself and say, okay, is there one thing? I'm already saying no. And so I'm going back, and it was really interesting that 80 to 90% of the interviewees at some point had said that they either ignored their intuition, ignored their gut, or a version of that. I knew what the right decision was, and I didn't, and I took the steps to fix it, or they didn't, and they failed, or they went bankrupt. So there's this whole thing on intuition saying, wow, that's really fascinating. And so I went and when I initially did the research, it was very woo-woo and all that. But, and that's fine if that's what you think it is. If you think it comes from the cosmos or God, or you get omens, that's okay. That's your definition of what intuition is. It's not for me to force that upon you. But I needed more research, and I dug it. I spent over 10,000 hours in research, found where researchers have found it where it sits in the with the brain scans, fMRIs, and lots of research showing the outcomes. And so it was very clear that I've got the proof now. And then I went and interviewed over 1,000 people. I had a couple of film crews, and I spent a couple of years doing interviews to find out, okay, so now I know what intuition is, which is in my book, Gut, which was the second book that came out. Yeah. But then the question is, okay, so how do I apply it? And so when I'm speaking on stages across the world on gut, I'm getting this other question. And so, and why do we ignore it? And so that why was just not answered in gut. And so I interviewed over 1,000 people, and I found out that the reason why they didn't understand, or why they ignored intuition was because in my book, gut shows that it's so complicated, and they had no clue. And then there's these things called intuitive signals, which are unique to each one of us that they didn't pick up on. The ones that they did pick up on are the common ones: gut, feeling, a voice. And what happens with intuitive signals is it starts very subtle in nature. Like Oprah calls it a whisper. I get sometimes a whiff. Something's just not right. Or in my cases, sometimes my pupils dilate. Now, so these things are very subtle. And we tend to ignore them because they're subtle, right? And it's just, maybe I'm not feeling too good. And by the time you ignore that signal, then it usually changes or gets louder, and then you feel a little bit more anxious. And then some of us say maybe it was something we ate, or it's just not loud enough to pay attention to, or we're emotionally involved in a business decision, or we're looking too hard at the data that, no, that can't be right. Oh, I can't, that's not a strategy because the data is not saying that. So we're bound by these things that these sort of placeholders in our brain. And so we ignore these other signals until they get louder and louder. And in a business's case, turnover ratios get higher, productivity loss, people are leaving, people are unhappy. The business is not going, or you missed an opportunity because a competitor went right past you. Well, they were doing things that you should have seen. I mean, you're in the business, you should have known these things, and that's what intuition does. But when you ignore these intuitive signals, the initial ones, now you're starting to make a series of bad decisions, and until they get loud enough, and then you stop.
Yes.
And you pause, or you've completely lost it.
I call those a series of red flags.
Yes.
So when we work with, as a neuroscience coach and someone who really does understand the machinations of the brain and understanding all of those things, just like you, we call those things red flags. And that allows people to remove the emotional response from the red flag, because they recognize red flag as something that their brain can do something about. And I love that you position it where we've found in science that intuition is real.
It is absolutely.
It's concrete. It is real. It is, it is that thing that goes off. And the more we ignore it, and I often say to people, why did you, I ask the question, why did you not listen to the red flag? What stopped you? And 90% of the time, the response I get is they were more committed to what they thought they wanted versus the reality. They didn't want it to be this reality. So they ignored the red flag because they were more committed to what they thought they wanted, even if it was painful.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a number of things. If you look at the background, it's really kind of the balance of head and heart, right? And so when you talked about that emotional, I mean, from the brain, I mean, if any kind of decision hits the fight or flight, the emotional place, the amygdala, and so, but you still need that time for the neurons to fire to hit the rational part, which is the frontal lobe here. And so what happens is when we make initial decision, we ignore everything else. And in your case, what you're exactly saying is our mental models are stuck somewhere else. And it's that fear. Fear is one of the 4 intuitive hurdles: fear of change, fear of the unknown. Your intuition knows it's right, but you don't. And I'll give you a very good example of one very, very quick case study. One of my very first interviewees was John Rothschild, who didn't understand. Was an investment banker. Didn't understand this woo-woo, all this stuff, because that's where the research was on intuition at that time.
Not there anymore.
Not there. No, definitely. And obviously with me, I'm bringing out a lot more science to it. And so he said, I'll give you an hour interview. You're a friend of mine, but I don't know what we're going to talk about. We can talk about intuition in the first 5 minutes. But anyways, we start the interview. You can tell he's just saying, I wish I met this person. This is all on video. And so as we're going through, I'm educating him that he didn't think it was based on past learning experience. He thought it was sort of cosmic in nature. I said, no, John. There's data that you rely on. There's past learning experience that it has to leapfrog off of. And so as I'm educating him in this thing called intuition, which is really kind of rooted in science and a lot of logic and all that stuff, which appealed to him. The very last question I asked him was, did you ever make an intuitive decision that people said that you were so obtuse or crazy that you made? And he said, absolutely. By this time he understood. And so in 1 hour, he understood what intuition was. This is a guy making probably 3-4 million a year as an investment banker. And he was on private jets, limousines, high-end restaurants, and he wanted to trade it all off to run one bankrupt little restaurant. And obviously his colleagues are going to say, there's something wrong with you. I have a couple of doctors you need to see. Yeah. And his wife is going, I think I'm going to go to the lawyer. She just said, you're nuts. Right. So he said, no, I'm going to do it. He quit. He walked into that one bankrupt restaurant based on intuition. That bankrupt little restaurant was Eastside Mario's location number 1. Yep. And that ended up being a $2 billion behemoth over 20 years, all because of an intuitive decision. So in 1 hour, he was able to understand what intuition was and how it reacted with the signals and all that stuff. He understood it. So I went from 0 to hero in an hour. And now I'm thinking, how far can I go with this? And that's how the whole Intuitionology project really kind of
You,
kickstarted.
you've said something really important, and let's bring it into current time. So we're now, people are in quarantine. There
Yep.
is a heightened level of uncertainty. Um, Intuition is going to play a critical role in people's ability to recover
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
people's ability to find opportunities out of this, and
Yes.
people's ability to create resilience. So what are you finding in terms of the conversations that you're having now? Because none of us have a crystal ball. We don't know where the bottom is. We don't know what is going to happen future forward, but we can make certain predictions and go with what that intuition is saying. So tell me a little bit more about what you're finding right now in terms of the conversations you're having with people in business.
Sure. So in a business context, in my opinion, when it comes to integrating intuition, there's something called intuitive resonance that I talk about. And what intuitive resonance is when the intuition of the business, and this is really kind of that is sort of captured through your believable and achievable values or mission statements. And believable not in a boardroom. When your employees come on, they have to believe in what you're doing wholeheartedly, truthfully. So when those values and how you treat them and the corporate culture that you have really matches or resonates with the intuition of the employee, that's saying that this is a relationship that is trusted, I want to work here. Now you have a winning product. You have a winning corporate culture, and that's how you talk to your customers. Intuition is at the root of that because you're being very authentic, you're establishing trusting relationships, and your messaging is very authentic. And what's happened with the situation that we have now, the biggest thing with intuition is taking a step back and thinking about it. I mean, it could be corporate retreats, team building, whatever you want to do, or just sitting back and thinking, closing your office door and thinking about what you need to do. That's when you're tapping into your intuition. And with the situation that we have now, when everybody's almost forced to be at home and to really think about what is going to happen and where we're going to go, it's thinking about intuition that's really going to get you there, because you're getting at the core essence of why do I do what I do as a business? Why do I do what I do as a person? Why does it bring value to my customer? And so many of, and we were talking earlier about this, that what COVID-19 is doing is, unfortunately, there's going to be some good businesses that are going to be shut, just going to buy, and I really feel for them. But the opportunities lie because all the crap that was out there with people that are posturing, beating their chest, no background, all that posturing, and that's going to be gone. The false, the Instagram famous, bankrupt poor, that's all going to be gone.
Famous.
Yeah, that's all going to be gone, because what people are doing is they're seeing so much of that. They're so inundated now, more so, that it's people are finding what I'm getting in Zoom meetings every single day with people, entrepreneurs, business coaches, masterminds, a whole bunch. And I'm getting involved at least every single day. And so I'm really plugged into what people are saying and what they're feeling. And I'm telling you, for me, this is an opportunity for businesses to really reset, to have those discussions and to say, okay, what is my messaging? Because if my messaging to a customer, it has to feel something that touches me emotionally. If it feels a problem for me, if it helps solve a problem for me as a customer, I'm going to buy from you. And so that's the messaging that you have to have. And that's at an intuitive level. It happens within 14 seconds is that established trust, which is what research is saying. And less than half a second. 14 seconds to establish trust. So you can have a 30-second spot. You've already lost me in the first 14 seconds on average. I'm below that average, below, or meaning in terms of time, because I'm so more highly tuned to my intuition. You've lost me in a second. So you can have a 30-second spot that you've paid $500,000 for, and you've just wasted your money on me, even though it may solve my problem. You just have not communicated it to me in a genuine way, or you're not communicating in a genuine way, period. And I'm not going to tell you, and neither some of the other customers, and neither some of my friends. So you've already lost the game, and you're churning through customers. So
you said something. Can I just unpack something?
Yeah, for sure.
Touched on, and I speak often on leading from your authentic place. Yep. So what is your authentic self-expression? Who are you authentically? Yep. And that, everything else really allows you, it kind of, all the noise falls apart.
Yep.
Because then you can authentically communicate am I someone who wants to work with you? Do you want to work with me? But it's from this authentic place. And I love that you bring that intuition into it, because that really is you. It's defining who are you and what impact are you making.
Exactly. And
And
yeah.
to me, that creates the value. Like, I also am like you. I will know immediately. My radar goes off really quickly. Yes or no. My red flags are, and I can see through kind of, we talked about the fugazis and all the noise that's out there and the posturing and the fakeness. One of the things that I think for myself, and I think for you, probably you can resonate with this, is what, when I see all of that, it has me almost pull back, because I haven't been willing to put myself into the noise, because I'm unwilling to be anything less than authentic. Like, I will tell you. And then I realized that by not putting my own authentic voice out, I was actually allowing that noise to take over, instead of people being able to see. It's like, this person has the grit. This person understands. So that's actually shifted in the last several weeks for me, being rewilling, like why I restarted the podcast. Because I wasn't certain in the beginning if it was adding value, and it takes a lot of time. To restart the podcast, I was listening to all this other noise of people saying things that were completely inauthentic. And that's the cause of this reset. So I think that's exactly what you're talking about in terms of, listening to that authenticity and listening to that intuition.
Yeah, and what intuition does is, when you're operating on intuition, it's almost like when horses race, they have those blinders on, and it doesn't really matter what's going. And if those horses don't have it, they're not going to win, because that the noise around them is going to get them off track, and they're going to lose their speed, et cetera, et cetera. And when we're making decisions based on intuition, those decisions are meant for us, and those are the right ones. As I said, it's based on past learning experience of yours and others, and so it really is rooted in something that you already know. Your intuition already knows subconsciously that that's the step that you need to make. And what we're too often doing is we're looking at vanity metrics. We're looking at, are we affecting people? And truthfully, when I put out a piece of content, it's great maybe to have the likes and all that in the comments, but somewhere somebody's going to get affected, and they don't have to tell me about it. Because there are plenty of people when I'm going around saying, Sunil, I saw that great video, or that tip that you did. Fantastic. That was somebody I never knew was watching, because he didn't, or she didn't like or make a comment, but it wasn't meant for that. It was meant because I was so thankful that that person used that tip and then, implemented it in his or her life. So we have to be very, very careful in doing that. And sometimes we're looking at our competitors, and in that, I think the pre-COVID days, there's a lot of short-term gain for long-term pain. And so we're judging what we think is right and stopping that, because there's people who are operating with short-term gain and not doing things authentically. They're going to peel away by the wayside. But if you're not operating at an intuitive level, by the time they peel by the wayside, you're nowhere to be found, because you're sitting and watching them, and you haven't come up and showed up authentically, when you could be just quietly right behind that person. And you could be third or fourth, or it doesn't matter, because the first place and second place are people who aren't operating authentically. They fall through the hurdles, and guess who's exposed and ready for the market? You and your business. So it's important to be authentic. It's important to keep going. And the long-term gain is absolutely where you need to go. You can get some short-term wins, but it's got to be long-term gain. And just do not look side to side. Forget about the short-term gainers, because ultimately they peel away. And these are the ones that use the big words and the flashy, cars, and the great videos, and I can make you a million, and I'm the best life coach. And what I'm just throwing a bunch of things that I've seen out there that where people
I've
just
seen
don't
it
have the
too.
experience. You and I we've talked about this before, and so this is just a conversation we've had before. But you when you operate your authentic self, people like me, the true customers, will cut through that noise, and not only will they cut through that noise, they will latch onto you from an authentic place. What happens is there's a stickiness factor to your product. So even if there's a product that's cheaper, guess what? You solve theirs, you provide a value. I support things that I want because it's an authentic brand. There could be another brand coming out. Sorry, I'll pay a little bit more. This brand speaks to me. If you don't provide value, then it's transactional. So
Yeah.
if I'm buying your product and it's purely transactional because you haven't given me authentic value, somebody else with a penny less is going to get me to get away from you because you have not been authentic to me in my messaging. You have not told me how it fits with a problem that hits me at an emotional level that resonates with my intuition. Then you're transactional. Then it's the Wild West. So if
Yeah.
somebody else comes in and provides me just a little bit more emotion, I'm gone. My money is over there.
So,
So
so
you have
tell
to be,
me, sorry,
yeah,
Sunil.
sorry, yeah, yeah. So yeah, so you have to be when you're authentic, you are really solidifying that value in the mind of the customer with your product or service that it's going to stop them from going somewhere else.
And in this time of reinvention, what do you think people should be doing to tune into that intuition to help them find what's next? I often get the question, and when I'm coaching people and I'm saying, okay, you have the opportunity to reinvent here. What do you want? And when I ask the question, what do you want? I get the answers of what they don't want. They don't want more of their past. They don't want to repeat the same mistakes. They want something different than what they currently have. And I have to find ways and use tools like their intuition. What is your gut telling you? What's speaking to you? If you could remove all of the noise and just tap into that, what is it? And when they finally come out with that, how do they, what then? So let's say we get them to the place where they start to uncover and they're listening to the intuition of what's next for them. You know, a lot of people, and I'll use anxiety right now because it's so high, they can't hear their own what they want because they're so concerned about what they won't have. They're responding to that fight and flight mechanism in the brain that is, you know, we're responding to loss, less, and never. We've lost something, we'll have less of it in the future, or I'll never get what I want. How do they tap into their intuition to quiet the noise or to allow them to go in a direction that is more powerful?
So there's a couple of things I use when I'm coaching, and we'll keep it on the business side because the personal stuff, the same tools we'll kind of use, and we were
Yes.
talking about this earlier. So from a business perspective, I look at those times when I was on fire when it was coming to the businesses I operated, and it's really from not because of money, but I can envision this persona of mine that was an entrepreneur that was happy in life. The businesses were successful, but I was just so happy. It didn't matter, but I'm not thinking about the bank account. I'm not thinking about my friends. That person in that moment was the person intuitively on fire and things were just really working. And so when I think about that persona, it puts me in that thing like, wow, you know, this is something. And now I've got lagging indicators. And in my case, it was $20 million over 5 businesses that show, and these are lagging ones because I took care of the process to get to the end goal. I've clearly got some track record there. And so I look at that persona that gets me there. So now we're looking at, okay, I kind of have a vision of my intuition saying I need to go in a direction. This is when you got to do a couple of things. One is take a step back and think about where you want to go with this. So if you know where you want to go, you want to take a step back and do that. The next thing you want to do is evaluate your relationships. Who do you trust that is going to help you with that direction? And this is where people like you and I come in. And more importantly, who do you not trust in a business context to move you forward? So who's going to be on the train that really gets you in your engine driving really fast down the track, and who's going to slow it down?
Yes.
The ones that are going to slow it down, put them either at the back of the train or kick them right off, right? And it's hard to do that, but your ultimate goal is to move outside of this with incredible opportunity. And I see this as a vision of opportunity. It's a bright light for me because now I'm resetting. I know what I don't want and I know what I want. So how do I get there? So when you take care of sitting back, when you take care of listening to family, friends, and people like you and I who are going to give them the direction there, and then the next thing is to take the first step, and that's going to be fearful. And so the first step means coming back to people like you and I, or they're now they have a tribe of supporters. Then take the next step, and then watch the small wins because those are lagging indicators, and you start moving in that direction. And every time you take a step, it's going to be a step forward because your intuition's already figured that out. You've already got some mentorship to help you that this is the right way to go. Now it's every decision you make, will be fueled by intuition. So anything you want to do in a marketing perspective, in a sales perspective, HR perspective, is what you're going to do as an entrepreneur. Every vendor you meet, every supplier you meet, as somebody you're bringing on, a partner, has to filter through intuition to make sure that you've got the process in place so that you can ramp up and scale that on an intuitive level. And if you don't make those, then you're already behind the 8 ball. So it's a cleansing for you from a business perspective. And if you already have products and services, so maybe you got to change how you market it. Maybe it's a different way of doing your ads.
Yeah.
Right.
You just touched on something I think is really critical for the listeners. And one of the things we started in the conversation is why people don't listen to that intuition.
Yep.
And the first piece is they're going to come up against their intuition is telling them to do something that other people will think are crazy.
Yes.
And the fear of what other people think and not getting the value or the recognition or the whatever you want to call that from other people often stops us from taking the right risk that we know is the right thing for us to do. And I think that's really important to also recognize your own indicators of, something's for you. And it does sound a little crazy because the crazy ones are really the ones who change the world. It does sound a little crazy, but going for that and not listening to that external conversation or external, I'm lost for words right now, but you know the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, it's probably external noise is probably a good
The
way to
external
characterize
noise
it.
and the external pressure of, am I good enough with you? Why people do that is they're trying to make it. They want to make sure that they don't lose face or their stock doesn't go down with other people because they're about to make a crazy decision or choice. And
Yep.
I think that's really important, especially in this time. Because what will make the difference for us to be resilient is to be willing to not worry about what other people think and really stay in our own lane. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and this is where intuition really comes in, and these intuitive signals, because there's a couple of things that's going to happen. One is when you're making the decision that is the right one, you're going to get a certain intuitive signal that's positive. And in my case, let's say it's the dots connecting, flow, and in some cases my pupils dilate. So for me, those are positive indicators that the strategic direction I'm making for my business is correct. And the other thing is when I'm dealing with the naysayers, and I've had so many in my life, when I'm dealing with the naysayers, my intuition is already signaling you should not be listening to that person, because I get an uncomfortable feeling when they're talking. It doesn't mean I'm going to give them a lecture or anything. It's just that when they're giving me a piece of advice, my intuition looks at that, goes into the subconscious area of your brain, which is a huge library, which is actually where 90% of your library is. The other 10% is the awakened mind, so to speak. And it's going to say, this doesn't jive with my intuition, your intuition. You're going to get an uncomfortable feeling. Thanks, but no thanks. And then you kind of move away from that. So your intuitive signals are really working. And this is the whole point of my Intuitionology project, is that when you take a course or you get coaching from me, I get you in tune with those signals that are telling you what's right or wrong. So whatever decision, whoever you're meeting, your intuition already knows whether it's right or wrong. It's whether you're going to be paying attention to them. And if you're doing it because you want to be part of the clique, or you're fearful, or you don't want to lose face, you're doing things for something called ego, which is an intuitive hurdle. And ego means you're pandering to the people who don't really have your intentions as their best way of moving you forward. Their intentions are misaligned. So your intuition can give you a signal.
I think that's also an internal driver. So, from my perspective, and when we work with our clients, ego and pride, those are things that we're driven to have an experience of fitting in, belonging, adding value. Am I okay with you? And that is a fundamental human need, right?
Yes.
Am I making it with you? And so we make those decisions with the concern versus with the who am I from an authentic self-expression. And it doesn't matter whether I'm driven. So you remove the ego, which is fitting in and belonging, and then you're left with the authenticity. And it doesn't matter what other people say, so you don't have to pander to the noise. You don't have to worry. You can rock the boat. You can be yourself. And that, I think, is really important and critical to be able to listen to that, especially as we come through this and you're developing your own resiliency. Because people do need to make pivots in their business. They also need to make pivots in their leadership. I think one of the things you're going to see out of this is people coming together in ways that are more raw and real, understanding the preciousness of life a lot more than some of the things that we were doing previously, which is the busy noise. And I think that is going to, for some, not for everyone, for many, will help them to tap into their intuition and make powerful choices as they go through this, because they've gotten to what's important.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, it's going to change your leadership style. It's got to be less transactional, and they're seeing that. Like when you're now going on Zoom meetings, even if they had that sort of transactional style, what Zoom meetings and all these kind of things get you to do is it gets you to become a lot more authentic in the environment we're in,
Yes.
compared to a boardroom or a very official place where everybody's sort of, you know, prim and proper up. Like, you know, you and I could be here and it's very authentic and you don't know what I'm wearing underneath. You know, some people may be
You have your
running
best
around in
on.
pants.
I know you
Right.
do.
But it's a very authentic, you know, you really, those things that you put up are kind of going down a little bit by a little bit. So it's a lot more of an authentic environment.
Yeah.
So leadership styles would be a lot more driven by relationship. And one of the things that I do for organizations is I've started a team building exercise using augmented reality. And
Yes.
so, and it takes people through two crime scenes. One's a robbery, one's a murder scene, and they have police reports, and they have witnesses that they see on video, and you know they've got cars driving away on video. They all have to come together
Mm-hmm.
to solve this, and there's two suspects, and I partnered with a former hostage negotiator. And so what happens is, in a very natural setting, you see all the organizational effectiveness come through, and you've got people doing things that you've never thought that they could do before, because you have a mental model of who you think they are, and then, or they've been super quiet, now they're taking a leadership role. Well, that's because you've never given that person a chance, right? You've always given it some kind of transactional type of work environment, and you've never really gotten them to trust their intuition to be a little bit more creative, or be vocal about maybe something's not going to work. You know, and oftentimes some of them may have a solution that you're looking at. So this is where you really have to tap into, you're talking about a lot more about resilience, and there's a lot of resilience in making those changes, you know, because a lot of people are going to be fearful, how's it going to look and all that. And the other thing I want to touch upon is, you talked about ego. Ego is good in a good way when you have a really good tribe around you. The ego that I'm talking about is one that it goes against your values or who you stand for. And so now you're really kind of pandering in that perspective. But absolutely, this is a great reset. It's a great time for you to really think about where you want to go in all facets of your business. And even as an entrepreneur, I think it's a wonderful time, because now and other people are going to look towards people who are authentic. So it's not only you moving forward, but your customers are also doing that. And
Yes.
they're looking to get past the noise, because they've already felt the noise. They've gotten a reset. Who do I want to align? Where do I want to spend my money? And you're there because you're asking the same questions. And once this all passes over, guess what? Those looking for value are going to attach to those providing value, which is you. And there's a natural meeting place that is going to happen, that is just going to happen naturally because of what we're going to today. And that's what I'm seeing. You know, people are making those questions. They're asking those right now. There's a bit of panic, but if you get past the panic and start looking at this from a brighter, cleansing perspective,
Yes.
and your path is clearer because it's driven by intuition, it's not woo-woo anymore, because guess what? I'm buying your product.
Yeah.
And that is a hard data metric, right?
Yeah.
So you want product proof, trust your intuition, you'll get the lagging indicator.
I love it. Sunil, thank you so much for joining us today on the Coach C podcast.
No
I
problem.
am very grateful to have met you, you know, a year and a half or 2 years ago, maybe now. And I know that when we do the work together that we're going to be doing in the future, and I don't even know exactly what that looks like, but I do know it's showing up. So that's just my intuition, knowing that there's going to be a lot of opportunities for us to collaborate on projects and
Absolutely.
help people really, and businesses really flourish and thrive in getting out of this and moving beyond this for
Absolutely.
the benefit. So thank you again so much. And how do people reach out to you so they can go to intuitionology.com?
Yep, intuitionology.com for the personal side. If from the business side is sunilgodse.com. In both cases, as contact pages. I'm on all the socials. My phone number is also on. I think it's on both, or sunilgodse.com for sure. But from a business or entrepreneur perspective, sunilgodse.com is more that realm, and so a lot more stuff that's going to come out in contact from there. But yeah, absolutely happy to reach out. Please do.
Amazing. Thank you again for listening to the Coach C podcast. We are reinventing ourselves, helping you reinvent you. Real talk, real people, real business, real time. Thanks again, and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Christine Nielsen, Nielsen, or contrast results group.